Dream Art. If Carlson Gracie represented the old guard of jiu-jitsu, then Dream Art is the future. Based in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Dream Art is one of the youngest major teams on the global stage, but it's already changing the sport in ways few could have predicted. Founded in 2018 by Isaac Bahiense, a world champion from Alliance, Dream Art wasn't just another gym looking to build champions. It was designed as a project, part social initiative, part professional academy, with the mission of creating opportunities for young athletes and giving them the tools to live as full-time professionals in a sport where financial struggles are the norm. Isake understood that raw talent in Brazil was everywhere, but most kids never got the chance to train consistently, let alone compete internationally. Jiu-Jitsu has always been filled with stories of gifted athletes who faded away because they couldn't afford travel, gear, or even basic living expenses. Dream Art was built to solve that problem. The team provides housing, financial support, world-class training, strength and conditioning, nutrition, and media guidance. In other words, they took a sport that often felt amateur and gave it the infrastructure of a professional career. The results were immediate. Within just a few years, Dream Art was producing some of the most exciting names in the sport. Mika Galvão, barely out of his teens, became one of the most talked-about grapplers in the world, blending explosive athleticism with a technical maturity far beyond his age. Ana Rodriguez rose to dominance in her divisions, showcasing both precision and consistency. Fabricio Andrade electrified crowds with his speed, aggression, and highlight reel submissions. Even beyond those names, Dream Art has a roster stacked with rising stars who look poised to take over the competition scene for the next decade. What makes Dream Art stand out isn't just their talent, it's their philosophy. They train hard, but they train smart. Their environment is supportive, structured, and relentlessly professional. Instead of leaving athletes to figure it out on their own, Dream Art handles the details, letting the fighters focus entirely on improving. It's almost like an academy for elite athletes, where everything from drilling schedules to strength programs is fine-tuned for success. In that sense, Dream Art feels like the natural evolution of what Carlson Gracie started decades ago, building an army, but with the modern resources and organization of a world-class sports team. Of course, Dream Art hasn't been without controversy. The most notable came with Mika Galvão's suspension after testing positive for PEDS, which sparked debates about how the team manages its athletes and whether its hyper-professional approach comes with risks. Critics argue that the factory model can feel too corporate, stripping away the grassroots family feel that defined jiu-jitsu for so long. Some say Dream Art is more about winning at all costs than preserving the soul of the sport. Others dismiss that criticism, pointing out that professionalism and opportunity are exactly what jiu-jitsu needs if it wants to grow beyond being a niche martial art. And that's what makes Dream Art fascinating. For many fans, they are the symbol of the next generation. Young, hungry, disciplined, and ready to put Brazil back at the center of the sport after years of American and European influence. For others, they're a sign of how the sport is changing faster and more competitive, even maybe less personal. But no matter where you stand, there's no denying their influence. Every time Mika Galvão hits a lightning-fast submission, or Ana Rodriguez controls an opponent with clinical precision, you're seeing the product of Dream Art's vision. Dream Art may be young, but its impact is already massive. They've proven that with the right structure, support, and vision, jiu-jitsu athletes can thrive as true professionals. And if their current trajectory continues, the future of grappling may very well belong to them. New Wave Jiu-Jitsu. In the modern era of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, no name looms larger in the no-gi world than New Wave Jiu-Jitsu. Born out of the dramatic split of the Danaher Death Squad in 2021, New Wave was founded when John Danaher, Gordon Ryan, Gary Tonin, and a select group of athletes decided to relocate from Puerto Rico to Austin, Texas. This wasn't just about moving to a new city or rebranding a team. It was about starting fresh, cutting ties with the chaos of the past, and building something that felt more controlled, more professional, and more sustainable. What they built wasn't just another academy. It was, and still is, a laboratory. John Danaher's approach to jiu-jitsu is unlike anything the sport has seen before. Where most coaches focus on drilling techniques or memorizing counters, Danaher builds systems. Every position, every escape, every submission exists as part of a larger framework, and every move has a clearly defined place in that structure. His students don't just practice a rear naked choke. They master an entire system of entering the back, controlling the opponent's movement, shutting down their defensive options, and finishing with ruthless efficiency. Watching a Danaher-trained athlete in action often feels less like a scramble and more like watching a carefully scripted sequence play out. To their opponents, it's suffocating. To fans, it can look like a masterclass in control. At the center of New Wave's dominance stands Gordon Ryan. Love him or hate him, Gordon is the face of modern no-gi jiu-jitsu, and he embodies Danaher's philosophy more than anyone else. He doesn't just win, he dominates. At ADCC 2022, Gordon didn't just secure gold. He ran through his division and then stepped into a super fight with Andre Galvão, a multiple-time world champion, and dismantled him with clinical precision. For many fans, that match cemented Gordon as the greatest no-gi grappler of all time. The gap between him and his opponents doesn't even look close anymore. His confidence, his ability to predict how matches will go, and his technical execution have made him a near mythical figure in the sport. But New Wave is not just Gordon. Giancarlo Bodoni shocked the world when he captured gold at ADCC, proving that the team wasn't just about one superstar. Oliver Taza continues to represent them internationally with his precise leg lock game. Gary Tonon, one of Danaher's original proteges, has carried the team's reputation into MMA, where his high-risk, submission-heavy style makes him must-watch entertainment. Even athletes who aren't household names yet benefit from the structured environment of New Wave, where every training session is about refining systems, solving problems, and pushing technical boundaries. Of course, New Wave's reputation isn't without controversy. Fans are split. To some, they are the future of Jiu-Jitsu, hyper-technical, dominant, and virtually unbeatable. They represent a level of preparation and precision the sport has never seen before. To others, they feel cold, overly systematic, and robotic. Critics say that their style lacks the creativity or flair that made jiu-jitsu beautiful in the first place. And then there's Gordon Ryan's personality. Outspoken, brash, and never afraid to stir up drama on social media, Gordon has just as many haters as he does fans. For every person who calls him the GOAT, there's someone else who dismisses him as arrogant or toxic for the sport. Yet, whether you admire them or despise them, it's impossible to deny that New Wave has changed the landscape of grappling. They've raised the bar for technical knowledge, preparation, and consistency. Other gyms now have to study New Wave's systems just to have a chance at competing with them. Their dominance forces the rest of the world to level up, and that ripple effect is reshaping the sport from top to bottom. New Wave Jiu-Jitsu is more than a team, it's a statement. A statement that grappling can be approached with the same scientific precision as chess or physics. B-Team Jiu-Jitsu. If New Wave Jiu-Jitsu is the polished laboratory of grappling, then B-Team is its chaotic, rebellious counterpart. Born from the same 2021 split that tore apart the original Danaher Death Squad, B-Team was created by Craig Jones, Nicky Rodriguez, Nicky Ryan, and Ethan Creelinston. While Danaher and Gordon Ryan went on to form New Wave with their ultra-professional, system-driven style, this group chose a different path. They set up shop in the very same city, Austin, Texas, and almost overnight, B-Team became both a rival and an alternative. From the start, the contrast between the two gyms was obvious. New Wave had the aura of a university, structured, serious, every detail accounted for. B-Team, on the other hand, felt like the frat house of jiu-jitsu. Their training was still world-class, but their culture was laid back, filled with jokes, memes, and Craig Jones's signature brand of self-deprecating humor. Craig himself quickly became the face of the team. A multiple-time ADCC medalist and one of the best submission hunters in the world, he also happens to be one of the funniest, most sarcastic voices in the sport. Whether he's roasting himself, taking shots at Gordon Ryan, or poking fun at the absurdities of BJJ culture, Craig makes B-Team feel approachable in a way few elite gyms manage. But don't let the humor fool you. The talent inside B-Team is undeniable. Nicky Rodriguez, better known as the Black Belt Slayer, has already carved out his place as one of the most dangerous heavyweights alive. With his wrestling background, freakish athleticism, and relentless pace, he's one of the very few who's pushed Gordon Ryan to the brink. Their rivalry has produced some of the most talked about matches in recent memory, and every time Nicky Rod steps on the mat with Gordon, fans tune in with the hope that he'll finally slay the king. Nicky Ryan, the younger brother of Gordon, may not have the same fame, but he's technically gifted and still developing his own legacy outside his brother's shadow. Ethan Creelinston, meanwhile, brings his own brand of technical precision and toughness, making him another cornerstone of the team. The rivalry between B-Team and New Wave is one of the most compelling storylines in modern jiu-jitsu. It's not just about athletes leaving one gym for another. It's about two completely different cultures clashing. New Wave is the disciplined, structured classroom where Danaher dictates the lesson plan. B-Team is the looser, funnier, more rebellious camp where athletes have freedom, and where Craig Jones' humor sets the tone. It's almost like watching two rival bands, one polished and technical, the other raw and unfiltered, both competing for the same audience. Fans are split, and that's part of what makes it so interesting. Some see B-Team as the breath of fresh air jiu-jitsu needed. They love the memes, the trash talk, and the fact that B-Team feels more like the people's team than a polished corporate machine. Others argue that the humor overshadows the results, pointing out that, so far, B-Team hasn't produced the same level of dominance as Gordon Ryan and New Wave. But whether you cheer for them or not, B Team has carved out its own identity, and in the process, they've made the sport more entertaining. At the heart of it, B Team represents freedom. Freedom from rigid systems, freedom from the grind of overly structured training, and freedom to just be yourself on the mat. They're proof that you can build an elite team without stripping away personality and fun. And with talents like Craig Jones and Nicky Rod leading the charge, B Team has positioned itself not just as New Wave's rival, but as the anti-New Wave. In a sport that sometimes risks becoming too cold, too technical, and too serious, B Team reminds us that grappling can still be fun, chaotic, and just a little bit wild. 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. When people talk about the most unconventional schools in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the conversation always circles back to Eddie Bravo's 10th Planet. Eddie didn't make small adjustments to the art, he created an entirely different approach. While most academies drilled collar chokes, spider guard, and other guy-based positions, Eddie stripped those elements away, using just rash guards, shorts, and a new way of thinking about grappling. Eddie Bravo's background explains a lot about why 10th Planet feels so distinct. He wasn't a product of the Gracie family tree. He grew up in Los Angeles in the 1990s, obsessed with martial arts, but also deeply immersed in music, creativity, and counterculture. Training under Jean-Jacques Machado, Eddie earned his black belt with a strong foundation, but his focus was already shifting. He asked the question most people avoided. If jiu-jitsu was going to matter in MMA, why should it depend on the GI at all? That question drove his biggest moment. In 2003, Eddie entered ADCC, the most prestigious no-gi competition in the world, and shocked everyone by submitting Royler Gracie. For decades, the Gracie name was considered untouchable, and Eddie Bravo broke that myth in a single match. That victory could have been the end of his story, but instead it became the beginning. He didn't want to be remembered as just the man who tapped a Gracie. He wanted to leave behind a system that would outlive him. That was the birth of 10th Planet. The techniques that came out of 10th Planet reflected Eddie's vision. The rubber guard wasn't designed to look flashy, it was designed to trap strikers and limit their offense in MMA. Lockdown half guard created control against aggressive wrestlers. The twister, once dismissed as a novelty, became a submission that fighters actually finished inside the UFC. These techniques were born out of necessity. Eddie wasn't interested in what worked for sport points. He was interested in what worked when someone was trying to punch you in the face. But 10th Planet isn't defined only by techniques. It built a culture that looked nothing like the buttoned-up, bow-to-your-professor traditions of old-school academies. Walk into a 10th Planet school and you'll find graffiti-style logos on the walls, music playing during rolls, and colorful rash guards instead of plain white Gs. Eddie encouraged his students to experiment, to question, and to innovate. If a position was unorthodox, that was a reason to explore it, not to dismiss it. For people who never felt at home in rigid martial arts environments, 10th Planet became a place where they finally fit in. The results showed on the competition stage. Gio Martinez and his brother Richie Martinez brought creativity and intensity from their breakdancing backgrounds into ADCC. PJ Barch became one of the toughest and most respected no-gi competitors in the world. Marvin Castell brought attention to the buggy choke, a move that spread across gyms everywhere almost overnight. Even more importantly, 10th Planet affiliates began multiplying worldwide. From the US to Europe to Asia, it became one of the largest no-gi networks in existence. Of course, 10th Planet has always been polarizing. Traditionalists argue that Eddie's refusal to train with the gi limits his students' growth. Others claim the system skips too many fundamentals. Some dismiss it entirely as gimmicky. But those criticisms overlook the bigger picture. Eddie never set out to replace traditional jiu-jitsu. He set out to offer an alternative. He proved that the art could evolve in different directions and still succeed. The fact that techniques pioneered under the 10th Planet banner have become part of mainstream grappling and MMA is proof of that impact. And then there's Eddie Bravo himself. He is outspoken, passionate, and at times controversial. To some, his personality makes the team feel like a cult. To others, it makes the team feel like a movement. Either way, it's impossible to separate Eddie from the system he created, because 10th Planet has always reflected his belief in freedom. Freedom to experiment, freedom to challenge norms, freedom to do jiu-jitsu your own way. That freedom is what defines 10th Planet. It's not about belonging to a strict lineage or preserving tradition for its own sake. It's about breaking rules, testing ideas, and carving out a path that looks different but still works. Whether you embrace it or reject it, there's no denying that 10th Planet forced the sport to evolve. American Top Team. American Top Team represents professionalism, structure, and scale. Located in Coconut Creek, Florida, ATT isn't just a gym, it's a training empire. Founded in 2001 by Dan Lambert, a lifelong fan of martial arts with the resources to make his vision a reality, ATT was built on a simple but revolutionary idea: to treat MMA like a professional sport. Instead of depending on a single star fighter or a handful of part-time coaches, Lambert created a system where elite wrestlers, world-class strikers, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialists could train together under one roof. His vision was to create champions, not just tough fighters who could win here and there, but athletes capable of dominating on the world stage. It didn't take long for that vision to come true. Within a few years, ATT became the home of legends and future stars. Dustin Poirier found a second home there, sharpening his boxing and submission game while making his run to the interim lightweight title. Amanda Nunes built her legacy at ATT, becoming the most dominant female fighter in MMA history, capturing 2 UFC belts and defending them against the best in the world. Jorge Masvidal went from journeyman to superstar under the school, pulling off the famous 5-second knockout of Ben Askren and headlining multiple pay-per-views. Kayla Harrison, already a 2-time Olympic gold medalist in judo, made her transition to MMA under ATT's guidance and became the face of the PFL. And that's not even scratching the surface. Yoel Romero, Thiago Alves, Junior Dos Santos, and countless others have sharpened their skills in that same room. ATT turned Florida into one of the epicenters of modern MMA. But what makes the school stand out is how they view jiu-jitsu in the context of fighting. They're not a school obsessed with barimbalos, fancy lapel guards, or racking up points in IBJJF tournaments. ATT's grappling philosophy is simple. Make it work in a fight. That means pressure-heavy top control, clinch work that blends seamlessly with wrestling, and submissions that can withstand the chaos of punches and elbows. When Dustin Poirier locks up a guillotine in the middle of a wild scramble, that's ATT's philosophy in motion. When Amanda Nunes takes someone's back and sinks in a choke after softening them up with strikes, that's ATT's brand of jiu-jitsu. It's gritty, efficient, and practical. Less about playing a sport and more about surviving and winning a fight. The culture inside ATT reflects that philosophy. Training is notoriously tough. Iron sharpens iron, and with so many killers under the same roof, sparring rounds can feel like real fights. For some athletes, that environment is exactly what they need. The daily test against elite training partners pushes them to their limits. For others, the intensity can be overwhelming. It's a gym where you either rise to the occasion or get left behind. Of course, with so many high-level fighters in one place, drama is inevitable. The school has been the center of some of the most heated rivalries in MMA. Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington were once teammates, roommates, and close friends, but their relationship imploded, spilling into a bitter feud that culminated in a UFC main event and eventually a real-life altercation outside the cage. Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Amanda Nunes once had tensions inside the gym, and there have been plenty of smaller disputes as fighters navigate their careers. That's the reality of a mega gym. When you pack so many ambitious athletes under one roof, personal conflicts are bound to surface. Love them or hate them, one thing is undeniable. ATT professionalized the sport. Before gyms like this, MMA was still treated like a patchwork of martial arts, with fighters bouncing from place to place. The school showed the value of building a system-driven, team-based approach to training. They proved that MMA could be treated like any other pro sport, with infrastructure, planning, and resources behind the athletes. And the results? Dozens of champions, hundreds of contenders, and an influence that stretches across the fight world. Carlson Gracie team. Long before the era of massive MMA super gyms like American Top Team or even the modern sport academies, there was Carlson Gracie. To really understand his impact, you have to rewind the story of jiu-jitsu itself. His uncle, Helio Gracie, helped build the foundation of BJJ as we know it. Martial art built around patience, defense, and the idea that a smaller, weaker fighter could survive against a larger, stronger opponent. Helio believed in slowing the fight down and conserving energy and waiting for the perfect moment to attack. Carlson respected his family's legacy, but he didn't agree with that approach. He had a very different vision for what jiu-jitsu should look like. Carlson believed that waiting around was just another way of losing. His motto summed it up perfectly. The best defense is a good offense. For him, jiu-jitsu wasn't about surviving. It was about attacking, dominating, and breaking your opponent's will. His style was aggressive, pressure-heavy, and designed to overwhelm people. Carlson wasn't afraid to criticize the old Gracie style either. He openly clashed with his relatives, arguing that jiu-jitsu had to evolve beyond just self-defense demonstrations and defensive tactics. And when he broke away to create his own academy in Rio de Janeiro, he didn't just build another gym, he built an army. In the 1980s and 90s, Carlson's academy became the breeding ground for a whole new generation of fighters. The names that came out of his team were wild. Mario Sperry, one of the founders of Brazilian Top Team. Murilo Bustamante, who went on to become a UFC middleweight champion. Walid Ismail, infamous for his fiery personality and for submitting Royce Gracie in competition. And of course, Ricardo de la Riva, the man who invented the de la Riva guard, a position that's still taught in every academy today. These weren't just competitors winning medals. They were innovators who changed the game forever. Carlson's gym culture was legendary and brutal. Training was intense. Sparring was constant, and rivalries inside the room were fierce. If you couldn't handle the pressure, you didn't last long. But if you did, you came out hardened, ready to take on anyone. His students had a reputation for being fearless. They didn't step onto the mat to play for points. They came to finish fights. That attitude carried over into tournaments, where the Carlson Gracie army was loud, passionate, and fiercely loyal. At competitions, you could hear them from across the venue, chanting, cheering, and pushing their teammates to victory. What made Carlson unique wasn't just his style of jiu-jitsu, but his role as a leader. He wasn't a distant, untouchable master like some figures in martial arts. He was close to his students, he laughed with them, he fought with them, and he was deeply protective of them. People who trained under him often describe him as a father figure, tough, demanding, but also incredibly supportive. That loyalty was a two-way street. His students would go to war for him, and in turn, he fought to give them opportunities. He was one of the first Gracies to truly push his fighters into international competitions, believing that jiu-jitsu had to be tested against the best in the world. Of course, Carlson's story wasn't without its controversies. His break from the main Gracie family caused deep tensions. He was outspoken, never afraid to call out what he saw as outdated or ineffective. That made him a divisive figure, but it also made him respected. Carlson wasn't concerned with preserving a myth about invincible Gracies. He cared about results, and he cared about evolution. In many ways, his philosophy foreshadowed the rise of MMA itself, a sport where waiting around gets you knocked out, and where aggression often decides the outcome. Even though Carlson passed away in 2006, his fingerprints are still all over modern jiu-jitsu and MMA. His direct lineage produced powerhouse teams like Brazilian Top Team and Nova União, both of which went on to dominate in the early days of MMA. The aggressive, top-heavy game he preached became the backbone of countless fighters' styles, and his belief in pushing jiu-jitsu beyond tradition is something we still see today in every innovation, from leg lock systems to wrestling integration. Fans remember Carlson not just as a pioneer, but as a rebel within his own family. He broke away from the old mold and created something entirely new. To this day, whenever you see a competitor smashing through guard with relentless pressure, passing with authority, or chaining submissions together without hesitation, that's Carlson Gracie's DNA at work. He didn't just change jiu-jitsu, he made it mean something different. Not survival, but domination. And that legacy lives on in every gym that values aggression, offense, and the warrior spirit over waiting and stalling. Now that we've gone through some of the major BJJ schools today, let me know down in the comments which gym you train under. And also, don't forget to subscribe.